You like pistachios? That's fine. Son, today's your lucky day. Lucky motherfucking day. You know why? Because when you walk through that door, you change your life. Hell, you changed my life. I'll be damned if you didn't change Menlo's life over here.
Sir?
Menlo!
Sir. Yes, sir. How you doing?
Kid, you like boats?
Sure he does.
I bet you like guns, don't you?
Damn straight you do.
We like big boats?
Ships.
With big guns?
Cannons.
Well, the U.S. Marine Corps has big boats with big motherfucking guns on them.
The Marines are a name you may have heard of if you've ever hung around a closeted Latino or a buzz-cut white boy who finally figured out that unless forced to, nobody wants to be around them. Originally modeled off the Marines of the famous British Royal Navy, the American Marines were quite lackluster in comparison for much of their original history, mostly because the real thing was busy whooping their ass for much of that time. It wasn't until around 1805, during the First Barbary War, that the Marines would begin to solidify their reputation. Having won multiple battles against North African pirates who were raiding ships around the coast of Tunisia and Algeria, making travel and trade around those locations incredibly pesky and tiresome and occasionally very expensive. Marine success would allow the U.S. to establish permanent access to the Arab world free from nuisances. Don't be fooled though, this was not as impressive as it sounds. The Barbary pirates were not quite as powerful as they were hundreds of years prior, and piracy was not the booming industry that it once was. Pirates at this point in time were just racing around on small, tiny dinghy boats and were not equipped to handle a full-scale military expedition. Their next major expedition would not go as well, as they would be deployed in the First and Second Seminole War, would get absolutely brutally fucked over by Seminole Chief Sam Jones, who would just dress up as a fisherman and walk into their camp and just ask them what the plan was. And yeah, he just fucked them up. Again, don't be mistaken though. Just because they got their asses beat didn't mean that they restrained themselves from committing insane war crimes and acts of genocide on the civilian population. About a decade later, the Marines would be sent to Mexico to aid in the theft of the northern half of their country. Initially not much help, the Army commander, General Scott, seized an opportunity to deploy them against the poorly defended Chapultepec Palace, which lay between him and Mexico City. And the Mexicans, outnumbered and out-equipped, were gunned down ruthlessly. Only a few years later, the American Civil War broke out, and for the first time ever, the Marines weren't able to just shoot fish in a barrel. And as you might expect, they were about as useful as a fucking heart attack, participating only as naval support throughout the majority of the war after getting their shit kicked in the Battle of Manassas. As soon as the war was over, however, they picked right back up where they left off. During and after the very asinine-style situation of the Spanish-American War, the Marines essentially became the escort service for the Army, marching into places first so that if somebody were to die immediately, it would be a chalk-huffing simpleton instead of an actual soldier. This tradition was still in place during World War II, where U.S. Marines appeared in most of the major battles of the Pacific Theater, famously being gunned down in massive droves so that they could establish easy, safe entry for the Army. Somehow, in some battles, they even managed to pull this suicidal strategy off, such as the famous Iwo Jima. Unfortunately for them, all their hard work and death would be for nothing, as funky white boy J. Robert Oppenheimer would mysteriously shuffle out of his New Mexico lab, and all of a sudden the U.S. had an idea they liked way better than what they were doing before, and in just 1 week, it was done. The war was over. After the war, the Marines found themselves in Korea, and also found themselves in the middle of some dangerous Chinese ambushes that left thousands of them dead. After that didn't really work, they would go to Vietnam and try that instead. And there they were met, it was exactly the same thing, except there it was even more brutal because they were using like sticks with sharp points on them instead of bullets. And it just like they were just falling on top of them. It was brutal. It was horrible. Probably fucking hilarious. 1982, following decades of repression by the ruling Christian minority of Lebanon, the Islamic masses began to rise up, especially the Shia minority, who were seen by the Christians as being on the very, very bottom of the societal hierarchy of Lebanon. The country had been occupied by a number of colonial superpowers due to the presence of the PLO, who had fled from Palestine. The Shia demanded the foreign powers leave, and they refused. So, one day, a young lad just driving around happened to accidentally nick a curb and found himself inside the Marine barracks in Lebanon. Somehow. And then his truck exploded, and the 220 Marines in the immediate vicinity all died. Then, for the first time in their entire history of being around the United States, they did something good. And they did as they were fucking told, and they left. Unfortunately for all Ukraine lovers out there, the embarrassment does indeed continue to this very day. After attempting and failing for 20 years to control Afghanistan, the U.S. had officially lost all of its position in the country and began to withdraw troops in 2021. Unfortunately for those troops, the 20-year failed expedition had been so expansive that there were hundreds of thousands of civilians as well as soldiers who needed to be evacuated. Evacuating all of these civilians while not dying proved to be an impossible feat, as an explosion in 2021 would take the lives of 13 servicemen in Kabul, including 10 Marines. These are just a few of the thousands upon thousands of examples of Marines, despite all odds being stacked in their favor, finding themselves dead. They basically are forced to find themselves in the most embarrassing of circumstances time and time and time again. An expected result of using a sort of reverse Hitler-style organization strategy, not making units for the most elite, but instead using the most special and simple soldiers and putting them all together in their own special little branch of the military. And don't get me wrong, while every single branch of the U.S. military is no doubt doing bad things that they shouldn't be doing, it is extra funny that we have a whole branch purely dedicated to just dying overseas.